everybody, my name is Aries Fairies. I'm a VTuber that has paneled and performed internationally at conventions, and something I found is that unfortunately, I hear it loud and clear, a lot of you guys are getting scammed, right? This is basically part 2 to our previous video where we covered a bunch of scams in part 1, but unfortunately there's more that I missed. The scammers are getting very, very good, and I think it's a good time to make a part 2, so hopefully we can cover the ones that we missed. So just to give you a quick recap of part 1, there's basically different tiers of scams. Some are very, very obvious, and a lot of them that a lot of people tend to fall for tend to be a bit more hidden, and also we get some that kind of fall into a grey zone. Most scams will prey on new members of the community, so if you're a newbie to VTubing, you're definitely going to be wanting to watch part 1 before this one. And the other one is that note that scams are often used together. So these I try section them out into kind of different ones to make them more identifiable for the parts, but just be aware that, you know, they're just getting better. They kind of mush in together and end up with one big mega scam, so just be aware of them, right? But yes, this video will not want to go as much into detail as part 1, so I definitely recommend giving that a bit of a refresh, or otherwise if you haven't seen it, check that one out first. Link is in the description. And finally, part 2 also build on some of the scams in part 1, where it has come to my attention that as people are kind of getting aware of the older scams, the new scams are evolving with the times to get more and more harder to detect. So let's get straight to it. So, I just want to also say as well from the first video, most likely you will get scammed and that's okay? These, I've been scammed and I want you just to kind of be aware. It happens, right? Hopefully this video will help you spot them, right? And just remember that these scams, these are done by people who've been scamming for a very long time. They are kind of designed to trap the newbies and VTubers into them. Another one to mention as well, this is a video for more client side. So this is if you're a buyer wanting to commission art, right? That being said, it's a good takeaway if maybe like you're an artist and you're just kind of curious and kind of like the other side of things. And I'm just kind of hoping that by like kind of calling these things out, both artists and clients could make, the community better by just being aware of these. And finally, I want to be very clear, there are artists that are doing the right thing, okay? And thank you for your contribution to the VTuber community. Okay, so please note that not everybody's out to get you. There are some amazing people out there, but unfortunately there are some people doing the wrong ones, and this is where this video comes in. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so something we didn't mention in the first video is that there are a lot of raffle and giveaway scams. Okay, now why? And why raffles specifically is that raffles, they are engagement bait, right? Often you'll see, big giveaway, I don't know, free VTuber model and rigging, right? Just follow me, like this post, repost, right? And you can get a chance to win. Comment down below, and that will just send this post in the algorithm and get lots of eyes on the artist. The other problem is that it's also can act as a very good kind of hook lead into scams. So we're going to go through the subcategories just kind of to break them down. Okay, for that. That being said, I also want to say there are some genuine giveaways being ran, but that being said, these are the ways that they can, not be run, as good as they could, okay? So the first one is the selected winner scam. This is kind of where the winner is like either the person with like the highest following in like the comments, or like the winner is like the friend of the person who is running the raffle, or maybe there's not even a winner at all. Basically, the point of this scam is that it's just for engagement bait, right? You never really had the odds to win. You had much less chance than you may have thought, and unfortunately, some people just aren't aware of these, that it happens, right? So for artists, the best way to do this is that you can get a bunch of tools to run kind of unbiased raffles. That being said, these are kind of hard to prove at the end of the day, but it's just something to be aware that does happen, right? The next one to be aware of is the everyone wins scam. So everybody reposts to get excited because they want to win a free model with like free rigging and everything, right? And then after everyone is DM'd and contacted that, hey, it's okay, you didn't win first prize, but you won some second, third, other prize because, we're so nice, we wanted to give more prize to other people. Now, I wanted to see part 1 video, but this is what I like to call like a very cheeky upgraded version of like the cold call blind DM, want to see my portfolio, or pretending to be another artist and whatnot. It's just a way for them to get into your DMs, right? This is used in part of the conjunction with scams we've seen in part 1, such as like once they get you talking, right? And they give you like a really cheap price because you got a discount. This is where they might do the sunken cost fallacy where, oh, thanks for buying that. Actually, you didn't buy the monetization, right? So that's like 500% on that, right? And then that's the cost of commission, or undelivered commission scam. How maybe that they say, okay, we've got a lot of people interested. Thank you. We're putting you on a wait list, and you pay that deposit. And we'll get to you. And they make all the excuses and blah, blah, blah. And your PayPal period ends and you can't get a refund. So that's that. Once again, we've got stolen work, hostage files, bait and switch. Please check out all the videos in part 1. But this is where I call it like the hook to get you in the DMs. And, because like anything, because you feel you've won something, right? You feel like you deserve it, right? It's very hard to step back from this because it's like, oh, so that's how it is. So please be aware of the everyone wins scam. Okay, so this is the modified prize winner scam, okay? And it's basically in part 1, the undisclosed cost scam. So I've heard a lot of stories where someone wins a full model. So you want a model, it's got, I'll do the art for you, I'll do the rigging or something, it's really cool. But there's undisclosed costs. So maybe you get it all done. Your heart's set because you are, so set on this like character that you've made, and you've gone to the end. And at the very end, just like a mission, they say, oh, sorry, it didn't include the monetize right. $500, right? Or something, $10,000, I don't know what, right? But the idea is that now you feel pressured because you've spent so much time, like, with this model that you're probably in love with, that you're gonna feel pressured to now pay that money, right? Often you gotta just be aware some of these raffles are vague, right? You aren't signing a contract beforehand, and I can see why it's so hard to walk away from that, right? This is kind of also textbook part 1 scam, but just because you won, you're gonna be feeling more pressure. So just be aware that when you win things, right, there could be kind of recouping those costs at the end of it when they try hit you with the, you can't stream with it because you didn't buy the monetization rights, okay? And then it's very unreasonable. So they should have disclosed these all up front when you won something. Okay. So what I want to say is that the takeaway is that raffles are a genuine way artists can get engagement. But some people aren't doing raffles the way they should be. They could be rigged, right? They may not be as innocent. They're just engagement bait, right? Be aware that raffles can be used as a high pressure hook for scams, and always be skeptical and always willing to walk away from the prize, okay? So the next scam is the man in the middle scam. This one, I've seen quite a few like stories about this one, and yeah, they're getting better. So this is where you commission a quote unquote artist, but they're just a middleman, and they commission a much cheaper artist. Often maybe somewhere in their local language, so that way it might be harder to find like that person directly to commission them, right? And then upsell the service. So just to give an example, right? I go commission an artist, let's call them A, and then I give them $500. And maybe artist A then hires artist B to go do it. And artist B is charging $200, but maybe only speaks with artist A in like another language or something. So really at the end of the day, B is making the art for A is giving the art to me, but you have to understand that the problem with that is that we're not having any transparency that artist B is the original artist A is just a middleman, right? And that in the future, this causes a lot of problems because let's say we have issues with the model and stuff, we're unable to update files because, the middleman A might have not had anything. It's obviously stealing other people's work, and it's just unethical sourcing of art. Give artists the credit that they deserve, right? So next. Man in the middle upgraded is that I've seen a few disguised as quote unquote companies. So now not only is it just like a solo, which is like I'm an artist and I'm just hiring people underneath me, you might get companies that make it a bit more like saying, oh, we have a varying thing because we're a company and we have like lots of artists underneath them in varying portfolios. But once again, right? This line of transparency and kind of who's doing the art, where's the art coming from, right? Even like licensing and all this stuff is that, do you even have the right to have that other person's art because they have actually made the contract with the person A, B has made the contract with person A, right? This can also be used in conjunction with scams in part 1. So just be aware that these companies can have false feedback, undisclosed fees, weaponized incompetence. To make them, a lot of things can be done to also make them seem very genuine. And these can be found everywhere on VGen, Etsy, and Fiverr. So how do you detect the man in the middle scam? It's hard to detect, as sometimes you're still actually getting genuine art, right? You can Google image drop on the artist portfolio or even the final product, and I've heard some people finding out because it'll ping to another artist. You'll often find inconsistency on the style and the portfolio. Often, let's say like it's a solo person, if they're putting out a lot more art, right, than you would think is normal for one artist, that could also be a sign, inconsistency, that, how they putting out so much stuff. Maybe they're hiring people underneath them and they're not giving them credit, right? And another good one is check out, call out posts on socials, right? I also want to clarify that there are genuine, kind of art guild groups that exist where multiple artists work on maybe different parts of the model. Like you might have an artist and a rigger or something, but normally every single artist is credited, okay? It's not just kind of like a mystery box where it comes out. So this is kind of linking up on part 1, but it's supposedly quite big where there's a lot of people doing middleman work. And it's very good that, as a client, that you need to do your research and check that you're not falling for one of these. Because, if it's a middleman, you might even just have communication issues on trying to say what you want because that person has communicated to someone else. Obviously, if you want file upgrades, that middleman might not be in contact with that other person anymore, right? Just be aware that you want to be dealing directly with the artist, right? And also giving the artist the credit that they deserve. Okay, rights to sell. We're going to go on a slight tangent here because this is going to link into kind of the next part, okay? In our first video, we talked about the importance of buying your CMOC files and not just your Mach3 file. That is all in part 1. I will not repeat that, but, it's just little tidbits for newbies, right? If you're buying a model, and something else that I forgot to mention is that it's actually very good to discuss your selling rights with your rigger or artist if you wish to sell your model after quitting VTubing. That way you don't have to deal with kind of these rules after the fact, as this can relate to the next scam. And I think this one could be a bit more grey and potentially a bit more unintentional. So buying secondhand models. Grey area. I wouldn't say necessarily a scam. I'm sure there's some really good, people who picked up some great bargains and it worked out really well and everyone's really happy, right? But for newbies, I would not recommend this. You just don't really know what you're getting, and I think, that's very risky. And why? It might be tempting to get a secondhand model, right? As it's cheaper, or maybe you're actually paying more than you should. It could be more expensive, right? But be aware of the inherited problems that you can get from the previous owner of the model. Once again, if you're a newbie, you will probably start, as you do VTubing and whatnot, you'll eventually find out, other things that you need, what you need, like maybe you want to get the files and maybe you need, commercial rights and all these sort of things, right? But we're gonna get into that in the next slide. So first thing, undisclosed contracts and information, right? You could just have some really weird clauses. Like what if the original previous owner signed a clause on their contract that said, that they need to contact their artist to modify anything, right? Which, if you signed a silly contract, you have to go deal with that. But if you're buying into that and maybe that person didn't tell you that, or they told you what you wanted to hear, that could be very disappointing if you get that and then realize later on an ask comes out going, oh, you shouldn't modify that. You didn't have permission, or who are you, right? That's very, very hard. Once again, kind of after the fact, dealing with all these inherited problems. You could find out there are missing files, right? It just all the way, it's unclear licenses, right? You could buy a secondhand model and there have been stories where an artist claims that the previous model owner had no right to resell the model or maybe art or overlays or whatnot to you, right? So you have to understand, buying a secondhand model, you're trusting the previous owner to basically either have all their ducks line up and having all their permissions, or that they've contacted the artists, and sometimes the artists aren't contactable, right? So at the end of the day, who's right or who's wrong, whatnot, things can get very, very messy just with secondhand models. The other one is that buying secondhand models, just for newbies, right? Just be aware that a previous reputation attached to the model, right, can taint your debut, right? Maybe depending on the size of the previous creator or controversies, you could also be mistaken for the previous owner. A VTuber model is very much tied, to the character that was with that model. So obviously, if the person never really streamed with it and didn't do much with it, you might be okay. But, some newbies might not just be aware, right? Be aware that your brand, right, is going to be affected by this if there are previous things, that has happened with that model. The next one that I want to talk about is that might come up in scams is it's kind of used once again in conjunction with like previous ones, but just be aware of like Photoshop evidence that may be submitted to try validate a claim. This is kind of adding on part one where we talk about fake feedback. An example of Photoshop evidence, because I don't have feedback, but here are some screenshots of some messages of people liking my work. It'd be good to contact the people in the screenshots or something, because you can Photoshop some fake feedback and send a photo. It's not that hard, right? The other one is that maybe when buying a secondhand model, here's a screenshot of what the artist said saying this. Maybe they didn't. Maybe it's just, there are unfortunate stories. It's always good to check like anything from the original source while always possible, right? Because I'm just saying, it's just inherited, like with at least secondhand models, it could be inherited problems. Just do your own homework. I'm just going to add a little tie into our previous one about why you want to get your like artist rights all sorted out, like fresh out when you get a commission, is that this is also not always possible, however, to always get direct things from the artist, because if the artist does leave the community, maybe they no longer take commissions or they don't check their socials anymore, you could just be out of luck. Okay, so once again, this isn't going to be like, 100% they sent me like some fake picture image. They normally have to go out of their way to Photoshop and deceive something, but it's just it does happen. It has happened. Just be aware of it, which I think is kind of what it is with Photoshop evidence, right? The next one is jumping modes of communication. So this is kind of, I've heard some stories just about, people getting scammed, and this seems to be just a tactic that a lot of scammers just use. And while not necessarily like it's okay if you change socials to another platform. I'm not saying like, there must be a scammer because they changed platforms. This is not right. But I'm saying that if they keep, changing like, 5-6 times, you're starting to get like, why do we keep changing platforms when we're talking? Just be aware that this is a red flag that I have heard some people talk about, right? So variant one is that sometimes when a scammer knows their account might get taken down, they might try to move their current clients to communicate on another platform or social media. So maybe they kind of don't see, the post, or kind of, if that goes blocked, they kind of can make a silly excuse or something, right? Or what I say is that, they do a resurrection where like they know they're going down, so they'll just make a few more new accounts and stuff and just say, I'm like, doing stuff. That happens, right? Then we've got variant two, and I've heard stories where, whether intentionally or not, right? So once again, it's like a gray area. If you're wanting to talk on like different social medias, so you're discussing, what you're commissioning on X and then VGen, and then you want to go switch to Blue Sky, and then you're switching to Insta, and then you're switching to Discord, and then you're doing a voice call with Discord that you did for 2 hours. I don't know, right? It's just gonna create confusion on what exactly you asked, right? Across social media. So, especially if you do a voice call or something, that's nothing written down, right? And that could bite you in the back later on if you thought you had something, if it's not written down or one account's been blocked and something's gone missing, it's just going to be harder, right? Not good, right? So the other thing is that just get everything written down to try to keep comms on 1 or 2 social media platforms at most, or just so that you can kind of see what you've got. If things don't go the right way, you've got it all in a place and you can have a look back and sort it out that way, right? So basically, like how scammers do it, they'll probably make some excuse like their account got hacked, or they're having issues with one of their social media accounts, blah, 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 blah. Just follow your gut here, okay? If it seems a little too convenient that they're hoppity-toppiting everywhere, just use common sense. Once again, I'm not saying that, everybody wants to change social media. There are some clunkier, messaging platforms than others, so it makes sense. But if it's starting to get to the point where you're like, this is happening a lot, just keep in mind, because some of these commission periods go for a very long time. So you want to keep your notes, right? And this is just something to mention that it's hard because I can't really say like there's any foolproof ways to prove or not prove. It usually just happens in call-out posts. But I guess it doesn't fall like directly under AI art that I took last time. But there are stories about just artists tracing another artist's work, or maybe they trace AI work and they pass it as their own. But because they trace the AI work, it might not come out like immediately as like AI art because they've obviously done their own style or something on it, right? Yeah, once again, harder to detect. I think what I've heard from people is they say just keep an eye out for like skill jumps in their portfolio from their previous art to like their current style. But once again, this is more of just kind of FYI for your own information. Note this is not foolproof, as some artists also just have different styles. Or, and often these scams are usually raised in the VTuber call-out post where, VTubers say, this person has traced and stolen my design. And why tracing obviously isn't good is that, that's not for that person to have taken that and sold that to someone else if they've just, traced a design or something, right? So that's where you want to avoid any artists that do tracing, right? Which is different as well for artists taking inspiration or like making mood boards and stuff, okay? Tracing is where you just get that and copy over it and that's it. So, final safety tips, okay? These are different to the ones in part 1, so I'm not going to reiterate that, but if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So sometimes it's better to walk away, especially with those raffles, right? Clients, remember to read your contracts carefully and ask questions if they are unclear. I know that was something raised in part 1 where people are like, well, what if I, as an artist, I didn't want to sell those files, I didn't want to do that. Artists, if you make it very clear on what they're getting, right, then if you sign something a bit silly, you probably should have checked that. That being said, sometimes clients just aren't aware of what the files do. So cool, I got this. Oh, I didn't know what that did. So I hope that these videos can give you an idea of what, different things to do, different things to ask, and that can help. Right? Next one. Please keep an eye out for your fellow VTubers and newbies, right? If you're getting a friend into VTubing or running plans about VTubing or, just teaching people about VTubing, I recommend touching over scam aspects to protect your fellow VTubers because the newbies are the ones who are most at risk, right? Finally, review part 1 for different safety tips, which I mentioned not to do repetition. But yeah, keep revising them, send them to people, and I hope as a VTuber community, we can really clamp down on these scams and protect ourselves against these scammers. And finally, I also want to say there are people doing the right thing. Like, there are some great artists out there. So I actually only want to say this is that if you're an artist, right, I'm sure there are some artist-specific scams that you have been burnt by, right? I would love to also hear if you have any stories. Feel free to put them in the comments, and I'd love to make an artist guide video on what sort of scams you can avoid as an artist, because these are a lot from experiences of people who have commissioned stuff, right? But I'd like to also try help make something like that. So please let me know. So thank you so much for watching part 2 of how to not get art scams. I hope it just helps raise awareness of certain things in the VTube community. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to follow me on Twitch or follow me on YouTube. And that really helps in creating more videos, and that I know that the support really helps. So all the best, have a great one, and until next time, bye.